Welcome to OLC4O. This is Term 1A, and we are on Class 4. Uh, we are actually on Lesson 2. I don't know why I didn't change that. It is the Readings and Practice for Lesson 2, Key Question 2. Today is September 8th, 2025, and this is Jillian Percy. Here are all the ways to contact us. The studio number is 1-800-465-7144. Remember that I am talking on air, which means if you are talking, you will also be on air. The office phone number is 1-800-667-3703, extension 2211. My email is jillian.percy@nnec.on.ca. Facebook, capital G, capital P, ERCY, space, capital W, AHSA. And there are two different YouTube channels. There is the WASA Distance Education Center YouTube channel, and there is the G. Percy WASA channel. So either one will have those courses on there, okay? So I always answer this question because it is the most commonly asked question, which is how do I hand in my assignments? And there are just so many ways to hand in assignments because we try to make it easy for whatever works for you. If you have a learning center in your community, then there will be somebody who runs it, and we call them a DEC. If you go to the learning center, you ask them to scan it, and they can send it to me, and then you hang on to your originals. You'll need them because we do a portfolio project at the end. You can also fax it to us, 1-800-463-7852. That's in Ontario, or 1-877-990-2023. However, we keep our fax on sleep mode, so give me a heads up that you're doing that, because I think we turn it on like Friday or something. So I need to know so I can go flip it on, and then I can get it. Otherwise, you may send it to us and we may see it, but it might be a little while before I see it, okay? You can also scan it using a scanner app, which I'll talk about how to do in a minute. You can mail it to me. I don't suggest this. I, in fact, really discourage it, but I know for some people that's the main way they've got. But it takes a while. There's postal strikes, and things can get lost. And once again, hang on to the originals. Some people like to use Google Docs for their assignments, and then you can share Google Docs with me. The other thing is you can hand assignments in by taking a photograph of it and then putting it into Facebook or email. I find that one is really common for people who did assignments by printing, like on paper, instead of using a computer. However, when you're doing this, keep in mind I have to be able to read it. So it's got to be very clear, not blurry at all. Preferably written in pen so it's dark enough for me to read. Sometimes pencil can be really, really hard. Make sure to hold the photograph, the phone over the assignment parallel, not slanted, or what will happen is the parts that are close to the phone will be nice and big and the parts that are farther from the phone will be an odd size. Do not just click the share button, okay? See how it says send as an attachment? Always select that. For whatever reason, this is way easier for me to pull up and download. I do not know why. When you put it right into the email, I have to really play around with it, which if it's only one page is no problem, but sometimes people are sending me 40 pages and then it becomes, an hour's worth of work. Whereas if it's an attachment, I can just unload it really easily and print it within 5 minutes, okay? You can use my email, but generally we prefer that people use the student work email, which is studentwork@nnec.on.ca. That way people can log that you submitted the work and other teachers have access to it in case anything happened to me. Now that is a broad, big database that all sorts of assignments come into, so always make sure to include your full name, your course name, your assignment number, and your name. If you're one of the students that you know that you have, like we have similar students, like we have some names where there's like 4 or 5 students with almost the same name, then put your community in there too to help us out, okay? If an assignment asks for both a rough draft and a good draft, please label at the top which one I'm reading and include them both. Now, the exception to that would be if you want my opinion on the rough draft and you want to say, hey, what do you think? And then get some feedback before you work on the good draft, that's fine too. All right, here's a quick little thing on how to use Adobe Scanner. I am going to assume that most scanners work much the same way. I have Adobe Scanner on my phone because it's relatively easy to use and it's free. Basically, download it from whatever you buy your stuff from. It's free though. And then you open it up. You can see you sort of have these little blue dots that you line up, or There's like a little crop in case you want to cut off something on the edge. And then you just kind of repeat taking those pictures over and over until you have all of one assignment finished, okay, preferably. Then hit continue. Now you can preview it. If something came off blurry or you cut something out, you can retake a photo. Then you can hit the saved PDF, give it a name. Usually I say the course and the assignment number, and then save it to wherever you save your things, Google Drive, Dropbox, whatever it is, and then send me an email and send it along, okay? Okay, so we are on Unit 1, Lesson 2. We are still talking about sentences and parts of speech. Okay, success criteria. We talked about this before. This is just kind of letting you know sort of quickly what my overall goals are for this lesson. And when you look at that, you can kind of go, hey, if I know how to do this, then I have achieved the main goals of this lesson. Okay, so first, define and identify the subject, verb, and object in a sentence. And I'm going to add there actually and other parts of speech. Okay, because they come up as well. Not parts of speech, part of a sentence in this one. And speech. All right, sorry. Understand the difference between a phrase and a clause. Define and identify these parts of speech. Okay, it comes up. Adjectives, adverbs, prepositions, and conjunctions. Okay. So the very simplest sentences that we examined in Lesson 1 have two critical parts, the subject and a verb or a verb phrase. But traditionally, that verb is actually considered the main part of the predicate. Those two words get used almost interchangeably is the thing. The predicate, however, when you're talking about the whole predicate, will actually tell us all the information about the actions or the conditions of the subject. So every sentence, no matter how long, must have a subject and then either a verb or a larger predicate, right? Which will still include a verb. Verb has to be there. The subject basically is the who or what that's doing the action or being described, and then the predicate is telling you what's going on or what state or condition they're in. So if I said the nurse, that's the subject, the predicate, talked to the patient, and talked is our verb. A tall tree is my subject, was old. Was is the verb, but the whole thing is the predicate. Okay. So sometimes the way we talk about that is the simple predicate versus the complete predicate. And the simple predicate just means the verb or the verbs that explain the action or condition. The complete predicate is the verb and all the other words that tell you where, when, why, or how an action is occurring. A short sentence might only have a verb as the predicate, in which case it would be both the simple and the complete predicate. So if I said the old man fell, the old man is my subject, fell is my verb. Because there's no other words, that's not only my simple predicate, it's the complete predicate. If I said the old man fell in the river, well, fell is my verb, so it's the simple predicate. And the whole thing fell in the river is my complete predicate. Okay. Now, where does the predicate go? The subject always comes in front of the predicate in English. I know that's not true in other languages, but it is true in English. Remember we talked about how word order is important? This is one of the big ones. Generally, once you determine where the complete subject is, now I'm going to say the rest of the words after the subject are considered the predicate. In a simple sentence, the subject usually comes right at the beginning of the sentence. However, in a more advanced sentence, the subject might come after an introductory phrase that describes when, where, how, or other things about the main action. That introductory phrase does not count as either the subject or the predicate. All right, here are some examples of how that would look, okay? So subject, he, predicate, ate some pizza. The frog is my subject, jumped into the water. But if I've got an introductory phrase at the party, it doesn't really count as either the subject, my table, or my predicate, got scorched by a hot pot. So at the party, my table got scorched by a hot pot. Now, if for some reason I didn't want that there and I had put it as, oh, I can't really, here we go. Let me see if I can get it. My table got scorched by a hot pot at the party, and I made it all one part of that sentence, then it would be considered part of the predicate. But because we've put it at the front, it's no longer considered part of the predicate, which I think is a little bit silly, but that's just kind of how it goes. Finally, that's that's my introductory phrase, his check cleared the bank. So predicate, when you're just kind of using the word generally, kind of means the whole thing. If you're wanting the simple predicate, that would be ate, or jumped, or got scorched, or cleared, because the simple is the verb. Okay? Okay, so these two major parts of the sentence, the subject and the predicate, are often broke down into smaller parts that help describe different types of relationships. Remember how parts of a sentence are about relationships rather than the definition. Some other possible parts of a sentence are listed below, and not all sentences will have every one of these parts. So first of all, object. We talked about object in, I think, even on like the first day or just not second day. The object is the noun or the pronoun that receives the verb's action. Keep in mind, not all sentences have an object, right? Because not all verbs are action verbs. And even some of them still wouldn't have an object. Doesn't make sense. The boy threw the ball. The ball is what received the action of throwing. Now you can also have an indirect object. Oh, it's bugging me that I didn't put this in white too. Here we go. Sorry, friends. Oh, that's why that kept happening. Here we go. Sorry out there in radio land. Sometimes I get fussy about this and I don't know why. There we go. An indirect subject is the person or thing that receives the direct object. So it's normally a person, but not always. It can only occur when there is a direct object. So it's like basically if I am giving you a ball, I can't say I give you and just end. What am I giving you? I don't know. It's got to be there. And weirdly, it doesn't usually come after the direct object. It usually comes before the direct object. I probably realize I should put this here. Direct. Okay. So the boy threw me the ball. The ball is still the direct object, but me is the indirect object because they're not throwing me, right? If I just end the boy threw me, that's a whole different sentence, right? He's throwing me the ball. And I don't know why we don't always, sometimes we put it a different way, but when it's put that way, where the me is right between the verb and the direct object, it means I'm the one who's getting the direct object. I sent you a resignation letter. Okay, so what am I sending? I'm sending a resignation letter, but it's going to you. Okay. Complements. Complements are just a word or a group of words that complete the sentence's meaning. This isn't the type of compliments like, ooh, you look so pretty today. Different type. It can be an object complement, a subject complement, or a verb complement. The cat is happy. Happy is a subject complement. It's telling you more about the subject, which is the cat. An object complement. That's going to tell you more about the object. I find baby showers boring. Now, if I just said I find baby showers, it doesn't make sense unless I'm trying to imply that I run around town looking for baby showers. But when I say I find baby showers boring, I've completed my whole thought, right? So complements complete an idea. And then we have verb complements. Verb complements are where a verb doesn't make any sense unless there's some more information following that verb. So, for example, the sentence I gave doesn't really express a complete thought. It needs some words to complete it. I gave a present. Present is working as a verb complement. Some of you might notice that is, in this case, also a direct object. I would have to look up to see if that's always the case. I'm not sure if it is. Mom made a cake. A cake finishes the verb thought. The cops pursued the robber, right? The verbs don't quite make sense unless you tell me what's going on with it, all right? Modifiers. Modifiers are a word or a group of words that provide additional information that modify, change, describe another element in the sentence. Modifiers can be adjectives, adverbs, phrases, or clauses. So if I said, the cat with a fluffy tail sat on the windowsill, with a fluffy tail is a little phrase that is modifying the word cat. The smell of coffee woke me up. Of coffee is modifying smell. The ancient Egyptian mummy cast a curse on them. Ancient and Egyptian is modifying the word mummy. The old man sang like an angel. Like an angel is a phrase modifying how he sang. Okay, so a phrase is just a group of words that are working together to perform a certain job or a goal. For example, we've already talked about how several verbs can be called a verb phrase. You can have noun phrases, prepositional phrases, adjective phrases, and adverb phrases. Here are some examples. The graceful willow tree. They're kind of all working together to be a noun phrase. Down by the river. It's a prepositional phrase. Has to start with a preposition. Glistening in the sun. That's working to describe some sort of noun. Like if I said, the lake, glistening in the sun, was cold today. Glistening in the sun is describing the lake. Carefully as possible. That's an adverb phrase describing how somebody's doing something, like they defused the bomb as carefully as possible. Now, clauses are a little bit different. A clause is a group of words that must have a subject and a verb. If it doesn't, it's a phrase, okay? A clause can sometimes stand on its own as a simple sentence if it expresses a complete thought. Then it's called a main clause or an independent clause. So for example, if I said, I love fish, I is my subject, the verb is love, and it expresses a complete thought. So it's a clause, but I can also call it a sentence. Some clauses do not express a complete thought, and those are called a dependent clause or a subordinating clause. Some examples of those might be things like, unless I get home, the girl I loved, because I forgot. These might be part of a larger sentence, or they may be attached to an independent clause to form a complete sentence. We will be going into these concepts in more depth later, but it's important you understand these kind of basic concepts for part of this lesson that we're going to be talking about. So in case you're confused, here's a quick summary, okay? Clauses versus phrases. A phrase is a group of words. It does not need a subject or a verb. A clause must have a subject or a verb. A phrase can never be a sentence by itself because it doesn't necessarily need to have a subject or a verb. A clause can sometimes be a sentence all by itself, but it doesn't have to be. A phrase never is going to express a complete thought. A clause may sometimes express a complete thought. Okay? Now, I know that some people will say to me, do you have to know these parts of a sentence? I mean, yes and no. Some people instinctively have a good sense of grammar, and you may be one of those people, in which case all these details may not matter. But what I find happens is sometimes, because English grammar is a little bit different than Ojibwe grammar or Ojibwe grammar, if you're having to do a lot of translating back and forth, sometimes it doesn't make sense unless we have kind of the common vocabulary to discuss. Oh, hey, the reason why this is wrong is because in English, you've got to have a subject in front of the verb, right? So I can't really have those kind of conversations unless you know what I'm talking about. So that's why we're kind of discussing all these ideas. Once you know it and have the habit of it, it doesn't really matter. Like in real life, no one's going to be asking you this. It just kind of helps us to be able to communicate with each other, basically. Having said that, there are a lot of really common sentence patterns in English that occur over and over again. We use them all the time. And when you get lots of practice for writing out these types of sentence patterns, you really begin to get a feel for when an English sentence doesn't quite feel right or sound right, and you don't even need to know the grammar at that point. So that's why we're kind of talking about some of those sentence patterns today, because when you're following those patterns, you already know, okay, well, I know this is a typical pattern that English uses, so I know it's correct. So one is just a subject plus an action verb. The boy dreamed. Cars raced. The eagle flew. Those are generally pretty short sentences. Then I can have a subject plus a helping verb plus an action verb. The boys will be racing. She was coughing. The pipes were broken. Popcorn had been made. Now, I was just thinking, keep in mind the subject. Some of these I've included a little article with it because remember, a subject is a noun or a pronoun, but a subject can have the articles. It could also have adjectives the magical pipes were broken. Magical pipes would still be the subject. I don't know why it did that. It's not happy with me at all, though, is it? Ooh. I'm going to take that off just because it's so unhappy. Huh. Oh, you know what? It probably just isn't liking the spaces there. Sorry. I did that so it's kind of obvious, like, the subject is over top of the subject. Ooh, the helping verb is over top of the helping verbs. I'm sorry, I don't know why Grammarly is being so difficult. Please go away, Grammarly. Okay, subject plus a linking verb and then a subject complement. Remember, the subject complement is generally a noun or an adjective. My friend is a doctor. The tree was unwanted. He can be difficult. David is the new teacher. Judy will be the president. We were late. Okay, and then we've got subject plus verb plus object, we've kind of talked about already. He kicked the can, the car hit the fence, she bought a new purse, the general yelled orders, the baby drank milk, a protest blocked the street. And then we've got the subject plus verb plus indirect object plus object. I sent my friend a letter. The teacher taught his students reading. The ship brought him his family. Dad built my brother a sandcastle. Kukum made us cookies. Shumus gave Mom moose meat. Okay, so now we're going to use this. This is support question number 5, and the answers are in your unit. But there's no point cheating yourself by looking at the answers first. Basically, try the questions and see if you can get them, and then check and see if you're right. So if you're doing this kind of as you're following along, I would turn off the video and do some of the questions. It won't take you very long, maybe 10 minutes, and then turn back on and see if you got them right, okay? Because I am going to give you the answers here. So for each of the sentences below, I want you to look at the sentence and then decide what pattern is it following. So the sentence is, Bobby is a mechanic. So now you can see for all of these, the subject comes first. Well, okay. So, subject, verb, object. No, because an object has to receive an action, and that doesn't quite make sense for that. Subject plus action verb. No, it's not an action verb. Subject plus verb plus indirect object plus object. No, that would need more words. Subject plus a linking verb plus a subject complement. Yes, because there's my subject. Is my linking verb, and a mechanic is my subject complement. It tells me more about my subject. So I would underline D for that one. Okay. I opened the door. Subject, verb, object. Yeah, I honestly think that's the one, but I'm going to take a look at the other ones just to be sure. Subject plus action verb, no, because I've got more words than that. Subject plus verb plus indirect object plus object, no, I don't have enough words for that. Subject plus linking verb plus subject complement, no, because there's no linking verb. So it's definitely subject plus verb plus object, so 2A is the correct answer. 3, John should have come. All right, subject plus verb plus object. No, there's no object there. Subject plus helping verbs plus action verb. Okay, so John is my subject. Should have, helping verbs. Come is my action verb. Yeah, I would choose B. And if you take a look, subject plus verb plus indirect object and object. No, it can't be. Subject plus linking verb plus subject complement. No, because come is a verb. Right? So it's an action verb. It's not a subject complement. So letter B is our correct one. Number 4, they gave me the job. Ooh, do you hear the pattern there? So subject, verb, object. Nope, too many words. They don't have enough there. Subject plus helping verbs plus an action verb. No, there's no helping verbs in that one. Subject plus verb plus indirect object plus object. Okay, subject, verb, gave. Indirect object, sure, me works as an indirect object. The job, Yes, so C is the correct one for that. Number 5. These ones are not ones where you're looking at the sentences. These ones you're more thinking about what we read and thinking of an answer. What is the difference between a phrase and a clause? Now, there's more than one difference, but the really big one is a clause must have a subject and a verb, but a phrase does not have both a subject or a verb. It might have one or the other, but it doesn't have both. That is the biggest difference. Number 6, what is the difference between an independent clause and a dependent clause? So an independent clause expresses a complete thought and can stand on its own as a sentence by itself. A dependent clause cannot. It does not express a complete thought, and it must be linked to an independent clause. Number 7, what is the difference between the object, the direct object, and the indirect object? Sometimes they just say object. I'm used to seeing direct object. I forgot about that. So the direct object is the thing that directly gets the action, right? And the indirect object is who gets the direct object. So if I gave my friend a letter, the letter is the direct object. That's what's getting given, but it's going to the friend. I fed Dad some supper. What am I feeding him? Supper is the direct object, but I'm giving it to the indirect object, was Dad. It's funny because we're using the word object. We don't usually use the word object for people, and most commonly an indirect object is a person. Not always, but most commonly. So it kind of is a little bit confusing, that one. Okay. 8, underline the object, the direct object. So let me rephrase that. The direct object in each of the sentences below. So he ate the cookie. The cookie is my object. They wrapped the gifts. The gifts are the object. The tree broke the roof. The roof is the object. Now, if you're sitting there going, I don't know how she's figuring it out so fast. Well, partially I wrote them, but also I'm looking for the verb. Once you see the verb, their direct object is typically, I won't say 100%, but typically it's going to come right after. The exception might be if there was like an adverb in there. If I said the tree, now we'll stick with that, what I'm saying right now. The nurse helped the patient yesterday. Now, I can't say the patient yesterday because yesterday is not an object. I could say the patient. Okay. Yesterday is more describing when the helping happened rather than describing the patient. The cook grilled the burgers. The burgers is our direct object. Okay? Okay, so now we're looking more at parts of speech. Okay. We talked before about 8 main parts of speech. We may have used some words when we were just talking now about parts of speech that you weren't familiar with. I hope you were taught this in school, but I know grammar kind of fell out of fashion for a while, so it wasn't always getting taught. That's why I'm kind of doing a deep dive here in case you were at a school where they didn't really talk about this stuff much. So we already studied nouns, pronouns, articles, and verbs in class 2 and 3. And today we're going to be talking about interjections, conjunctions, prepositions, adverbs, and adjectives. Okay? So interjections are just words that are used to express strong feelings, such as joy, surprise, anger, or fear. They may appear all on their own as a sentence, which is why they're kind of a special thing. They're often followed by an exclamation point, but they don't actually have to be. Well, I feel like they do have to be. Some examples would be things like, hey, no, yay, boo, ah, help, wow, oh yeah, things like hello, bye, ick. Some of those might not necessarily have an exclamation point. Ouch. They are used a lot in conversational speech, or you'll see them a lot in comic strips, or written dialogue, for example. But in your typical essays that you're writing to me, you wouldn't normally use a lot of interjections, right? They're more casual, and academic writing's a little more formal. Conjunctions. Conjunctions are words that are used to join words or phrases or clauses together. Some examples are words like for, so, or, but, unless, except, although, after, or before. So for example, I like pizza and hot dogs. Oops. And is a conjunction. I need to eat before I faint. Before is acting as a conjunction there. I want to go to the mall, but I don't have any money. But is acting as a conjunction. So there are coordinating conjunctions, subordinating conjunctions, and correlative conjunctions. We'll go into more detail on those a little bit later, but I did briefly give you some examples of each because they are going to show up in some of our sentences. Coordinating is a special category. There's only 7 of them, okay? For and nor, but or yet or still. Subordinating conjunctions, there are so many. This is just a tiny little sample, okay? After, before, during, because, until, except, unless, wherever, whether, whereas, since, or that. And correlative conjunctions always come in pairs. So both and, whether or, not only but also, either or, neither nor, if then, rather than. So those are generally going to be in, I would say, complex sentences. We will talk about them more. Don't worry about them. We don't really use them for these examples, but I just wanted to get that across real quickly just to give you some examples, okay? All right, and then prepositions. So I find sometimes students will get prepositions mixed up with conjunctions, which actually makes sense because prepositions do connecting a little bit. But a preposition is a word that's going to connect a noun or a pronoun to the entire rest of the sentence and show how it's related. Okay? Prepositions can show relationships of time, location, direction, origin, measurement, agency, possession, instrument, reason, and purpose. So preposition is always going to show a relationship. And often between 2 unequal grammatical parts. So things like at, during, of, by, with, for, down, over, from, or to. So he went to the store. To is a preposition. She fell down the stairs. Down is a preposition. Prepositional phrases are just a group of words that start with a preposition and are connected to the main sentence. So Mom went to the store. To the store is a prepositional phrase. A prepositional phrase is always going to start with a preposition. I built the bookshelf with a hammer and nails. With is a preposition. With a hammer and nails is the prepositional phrase. The book was written by Stephen King. By Stephen King is our prepositional phrase, and by all by itself would be the preposition. Okay? Here are, again, some prepositional examples. There are so many prepositions in English, and I actually find these are probably the most confusing part of English because sometimes they'll get used in more than one way, or it can be a very minute, very small difference between the meaning of one to the other. So if you're ever not sure if you're using the right preposition, look it up in a dictionary or look it up online and kind of check and make sure that you're using it correctly, because I do find that's the trickiest part of English, I think anyways. So some example of time prepositions: during, at, after, before. Directional, things like up, down, over, under. Location: beside, between, near, inside. Origin: from, by, or of. Measurement: of, by, at, or per. So I see what I'm saying is like of could be origin, like that is a car, no, let me think, a rug of Persia, or I could buy a pound of butter. It gets used in more than one way. Agency is by or with. That's usually like who did it. Possession is like belonging, for, in, of, or from, like she is in the, let me think, in the chess club. That is from the public library. Instrument, with, be, via, or through. And then purpose or reason are kind of the tricky ones. We've got things like concerning, regarding, against, about, due to, since, because of, or in order to. And again, like I said, there's a lot more than just that. All right, adverbs and adjectives are both types of modifiers. Remember, our modifiers are part of a sentence. Adverbs and adjectives are specific parts of speech. An adjective is going to modify or describe a noun or a pronoun. Adjectives can be a whole bunch of different categories. They can describe a quality or an opinion, color, the size, the age of something, the shape of something, what type of material it's made from, the purpose for it. Some examples would be things like flexible, wire, beautiful, day, blue, cup, large, bear, young, man, square, mirror, wooden, spoon, surgical, gloves. Now, in all those examples, I was putting the adjective right in front of the noun, which is typical, but not the only place it can go. Sometimes adjectives will appear after a state of being verb. For example, I could say the old man was doing something, like the old man was driving a car. But if I just wanted to talk about the man and make the focus of the sentence the man, I might say the man was old. And even though old isn't in front of the word man, it's still basically describing the word man. Okay? Several adjectives together can function as an adjectival phrase. Here we are. Oh, what happened there? Hang on. Okay, so here's some adjective examples. Opinions, things like amazing, horrible, scary, boring. Size, huge, tiny, average, big. Physical qualities, like that's kind of almost like a science kind of word. Like if you were trying to describe something, like it was soft, it was thin, it was rough, it was wide, it was flexible. Tender, like if you were describing, oh, that bruise on my knee is really tender, right? I'm not describing the emotion there. Shape, oval, circular, square, cubic. Keep in mind, that doesn't have to be a flat 2D shape. It could be a 3D shape, like it was cubic or ovoid. It could also be a line, like a zigzag or something. Age, not just a person's age, like things like young or old or ancient or vintage or prehistoric. Colors, things like purple, yellow, beige, aqua. Origin is like where it comes from. So Pacific, Canadian, Western, African. A lot of times those will be capitalized. Material, what's it made out of? Wooden, silver, paper, glass. And then type or purpose. Running is a special word describing what type of shoes you are. Because you could have running shoes, you could have ballet shoes, or soccer shoes, or, I don't know, a winter hat versus a summer hat, a picnic basket, a kitchen table versus a patio table. So kitchen is serving as an adjective there. Even though kitchen normally describes, the place where you do your cooking, in this particular case, it's being used as an adjective. So remember how we talked about sometimes a word can do more than one job in a sentence? That's kind of an example of that sort of thing. So now, this is kind of a silly thing, but there is something called the royal order of adjectives, okay? If you are using multiple adjectives in a sentence, there is a typical order that English language speakers generally place them in. This is somewhat humorously referred to as the royal order of adjectives. This tends to be intuitive. In other words, people just kind of grasp it rather than follow a list of rules. But there is a pattern to it, and it can be taught. So for example, as a teacher, if I was teaching, say, a deaf child, I might make sure to teach this to them because they won't be hearing people speak it, so they aren't necessarily going to pick up the pattern. So I would have to teach that. The other thing is different languages don't have the same order, right? So for example, in French, it's really common to put adjectives after the noun. So this kind of thing is where every language is different, okay? So generally, and there is a little bit of argument over this, but this is the best I could find, determiners quantity, quantities like numbers, opinion, size, age, shape, color, origin or material, and then a qualifier or a purpose word like kitchen. Now, this order is not adhered to 100%, okay? And this is definitely not the kind of thing that I would mark you wrong on. I might put a little note if I thought it sounded really strange to just let you know, but I'm just kind of giving this information. Sometimes we might change the order slightly in order to put emphasis on a certain aspect of something we're describing. For example, normally color comes before the material. But if I really wanted to emphasize the material for some reason when I was talking to somebody, I might place it first to put more stress on it. Like, I wanted to find wooden red chairs rather than metal red chairs. And I'm saying it that way because I'm trying to put the word first that is most important to me. Okay? That will happen in language all the time. Okay, now I used a word called determiner. Determiners are a special type of adjective. There's a kind of a few different categories there. Articles count as a determiner, sorry, not determinator. The or an. Possessives, his, hers, theirs, ours, its. Demonstratives, that, this, these, those. They're just kind of a special type of adjective. I always think of them as sort of pointing words, words that are like kind of indicating something special. Okay, moving on to adverbs. An adverb is a word or a combination of words that modifies or describes a verb, an adjective, or another adverb. Adverbs will often tell you more about how, when, where, or why something happened. The adverb might come before or it might come after the verb. This is one of those funny ones where there's a lot of disagreement. I've seen some websites that say, oh yeah, it always comes before, and I've seen other websites that say it always comes after. For me personally, just looking at my own usage, I find it really depends on the verb. And just like we were talking with adjectives, it depends a little bit on what I'm trying to emphasize in a sentence. Sometimes I'm really trying to emphasize the adverb, and so I'm going to say that first. Other times I'm not. If it's describing an adjective or an adverb, though, it usually does come right before the adjective or adverb. So if I said, he communicated politely with the cops. Politely is my adverbs, and it's describing the word communicated. Now, I could easily say he politely communicated with the cops. That's fine, too. Either way is fine. The losing team felt very discouraged. Discouraged is an adjective. Very is the adverb. Now, I couldn't say the losing team felt discouraged very. In English, that just doesn't make any sense. She sang too loudly. Too is an adverb describing another adverb, which is loudly. And again, I couldn't say she sang loudly too. So there's a few type of adverbs. Hang on. I'm just going to write this here so I'm running out of room a little bit. Adverbs can act as what they call intensifiers. And it basically means like whatever adverb you're using or whatever adjective you're describing, it's like it's more or less of it. So I might say very, or mostly, or I might go the opposite way, say barely, or scarcely. And all of those would come in front of whatever adjective or adverb they're describing, okay? There's a lot more than just that. Those are just a few examples of those, okay? So here are some examples of adverbs. Adverbs can tell you how, the adverbs of manner, carefully, quietly, softly, happily. Those ones will often end in ly. And a lot of times adjectives, hang on a second, it's really common for an adjective to get changed into an adverb by adding an ly. Change into an adverb by adding ly to the end. Okay, it's a really common way to do it. Sometimes those ones are emphasized so much in school, I find, that sometimes the other types of adverbs don't get recognized as easily, okay? So that's the most typical one that we tend to think of, but there are a lot of other adverbs. There are adverbs of time or frequency or duration, things like afterwards, daily, always, never, not. Adverbs of place, here, there, nearby, outside. Adverbs of purpose, those are going to explain the reason for something. Therefore, consequently, because or because of, hence. All right. So several adverbs working together can make an adverbial phrase. Sometimes those will also be a prepositional phrase. A prepositional phrase can be doing two jobs at once. It may start with a preposition, but in the sentence, it's still describing the verb or the action that's happening. So she will be done work in a minute. In a minute is describing when she's going to be done. Okay? He tries to work out every day. Every day is a prepositional phrase describing how often he's working out. During wintertime, the bears hibernate. So here you can see we've put the adverb phrase in front of the sentence as an introductory phrase. If you're using a lot of adverbs, that can be one way to either split them up or to put emphasis on a certain part of it. Like, I want you to know it's during wintertime the bears hibernate, not during the summertime. So that's why I'm saying it first, because remember how word order is important in English. By saying it first, I'm giving it the most importance. He answered his dad very quickly. Okay? So, hang on a second. Okay. Oh, yeah, okay. So sometimes adverbs may be placed at the beginning of a sentence to help emphasize that the adverb is describing the entire sentence, not just the action. When this happens, the subject generally comes right after the adverb or adverb phrase. Also, I'm going to say, also put a comma after the phrase to show that it is not the main part of the sentence, okay? Otherwise, your reader is going to be looking around going, where's the subject? Where's the verb? I'm confused. What's happening? Okay? So a lot of punctuation is just kind of giving your reader a heads up to what's happening. So here we've got overnight, comma, the weather had turned cool. During lunch, comma, we went to the basketball tryouts. Due to snow, comma, the school was closed. Suddenly, comma, she screamed. Okay. So, the other big thing is, hang on. Oh, there we go. We're almost near the end. Using multiple adverbs in a sentence. Okay. Just like with adjectives, there is a typical order, but I find it's broken even more. The big thing is to make sure that your meaning is really, really clear when you're writing, okay? You don't want to put a long string of adjectives all in a row and confuse people. You could, right? I could say, oh, it's funny that it's always giving me that right now. Where's just my typical one? Hang on. All right. Sorry. I have a whole system here, but it doesn't quite work. Okay. Make this a little bit smaller. Probably going to have to discuss this a little bit more tomorrow. Okay, so if I said, James goes to work every day in the afternoon via the subway. Let me think. That's a lot. So here we've got every day is my one adverb phrase. In the afternoon is another adverb phrase. Via the subway is another adverb phrase. Now, that sounds clunky. I would probably change that up if I were going to use it in my writing, right? Sometimes when we're writing, we're just trying to make things sound more clear. Other times we're trying to make it more beautiful. So here, this is probably fairly clear. It's not beautiful speech, though, I gotta say. I might say every day in the afternoon. Oh no, you know what? Every day, comma, James goes to work in the afternoon via the subway. Okay? It's a little easier to read. Okay? I am running out of time. I will talk about the royal order of adverbs. It's not quite as intense as the royal order of adjectives, but we will talk about that tomorrow for class 5. I will be here for a little bit if you want to message me. There's no point calling after 4:30 because unfortunately after 4:30 there's nobody answering the phones up front. But if you send me an email, I will check on emails for the next little while, okay? I will talk to you guys tomorrow, and you guys have a good evening.